Welcome back to The Joy of Vinyl. I'm Rick Coste. I'm always looking for ways to improve the sound of my setup. And, just recently I added a new stylus, replacing the Ortofon Blue that I had with an Ortofon Bronze. So with it came an improved soundstage and a bit more clarity of detail. But there were two tweaks I made that changed my listening experience for the better, even more than the addition of the new stylus. One tweak was completely free. It didn't cost me a thing. And the other cost less than $40. And both had to do with my speakers. A few weeks ago, I picked up a pair of Klipsch 600 Mark II speakers. As with everything else I do, I spent days, if not weeks, researching speakers in the price range that I wanted. After reading and watching countless reviews, I settled on the Klipsch. But that's not the upgrade I'm talking about. After a few weeks living with the Klipsch, I noticed something I hadn't with my previous speaker setup. Ear fatigue. The high end was a bit more noticeable than it had been before. Listening to an old copy of Meet the Beatles wasn't quite as pleasurable as it had been in the past. So what had changed? Well, my speakers changed. But these were supposed to be an improvement, right? They were an upgrade over what I had prior. They cost twice as much as my previous pair had. So what was up? My amp has tone controls on it, so that could help the issue, but I bypass those. I'd rather not introduce changes in tone to the sound, especially if I have to keep tweaking that or change it for every other album. So I sat and listened, and then it hit me. These speakers were larger and more dynamic than my old ones, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have bought them. But it was the direction of the sound waves. Those were changed as a result of the taller, higher speakers, larger speakers. My listening room isn't treated for sound, but it's always provided a great listening experience, so I never saw the need to. And maybe it's not the speakers, but how they're placed. And that's another thing. My room, my vinyl room, isn't large. I don't have a lot of choices when it comes to equipment placing. But there was one thing I could do. Move the speakers. Not to a different spot in the room. I really don't have that luxury. I moved them a few more inches away from the back wall, right back here, and I angled the speakers, kind of towed them so that the back was facing the corner, or the back was to the corner of the room, or corner of the wall. Now the ports in the rear have more room to breathe. Now by angling them, I'm also redirecting the sound waves. Now, I'm no expert on sound waves, and looking at numbers and everything kind of gives me a headache most of the time. But I do know that sound reflects, and every speaker is different. By putting my new speakers in exactly the same position as my old ones, I wasn't taking their differences into account. It wasn't a great position for them. Like I said, I don't have a lot of room here to play with, but with a little trial and error, even by a few inches, the sound improved almost immediately. My ear fatigue is gone, as is the pronounced treble that I was experiencing. In fact, the sound is more three-dimensional now. Now, if that makes any sense at all, I'm not sure, but I did all of this for free. All I did was move the speakers. So, what does this actually accomplish? Well, I shifted the stereo image. I've always followed the triangle rule of speaker placement. What I never really considered was angle. Simply pointing the speakers straight ahead used to work fine when they were smaller. With the new Klipsch I got, I had a wider soundstage to contend with. The room played an even larger role than it had before. Now, I didn't want to get into the science of room treatment and reflections, so all I did was played around with different angles. And then I hit the sweet spot. The entire process took, I would say, less than an hour. And at the end of it, when I closed my eyes and played Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here, it sounded like the band had time traveled from 1975 and had set their equipment right up in front of me. And it cost me $0. So that was tweak number 1. I mentioned I made 2 tweaks. Tweak number 2 cost less than $40, and it did just as much to improve the sound. But I'll cover that in next week's episode. Don't want to miss it? Well, why not subscribe to the show? If you enjoyed this episode and want to know when new episodes are released, click subscribe over here somewhere. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.